Hello and welcome back to MacStories Unwind. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Federici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Good. We're headed into the weekend pretty soon, and we've got some picks today. We absolutely have some picks. But first, we have other things to talk about.
I cannot wait for this. I am so here for this Unplugged segment. Please go ahead.
Okay, so you may notice if you're watching the video that I'm wearing kind of a light green shirt underneath my flannel shirt, t-shirt.
Okay.
All right. And this inspired me for MacStories Unwind because if you look at this shirt on the pocket, see that?
Okay. What is it? It's an animal?
It's a pig. It's a pig.
It's a pig. Okay.
It's a pig wearing a little hat, like a little butcher shop person's hat.
Okay.
And that's because it's for a grocery store in the South called Piggly Wiggly.
Piggly Wiggly. Okay.
And it got me thinking about funny grocery store names, particularly in the South, because I think the ones down here are funnier than most parts of the United States. And Piggly Wiggly's motto is shop the pig. That's what you do. You shop the pig.
God.
And so Jennifer,
I assume this is a meat focused.
It's just a regular grocery store. It's not particularly meat focused, no, but it's been around for a very long time. I think Jennifer's sister got me this t-shirt, and so I just happened to put it on this morning, and it made me think of Piggly Wiggly. But it's not the only funny grocery store name. It's probably the funniest, I will give you that. But there is also the Food Lion, which I think, another animal.
The Food Lion.
The Food Lion.
Okay.
Food Lion's been around forever. That was around down here when I was in college too, back in the 80s. But Food Lion, just another standard grocery store, nothing special particularly. I mean, it's kind of considered a little less expensive than some of the fancier grocery stores around here. There's another one just called Harris Teeter, which sounds maybe British, I suppose. Harris Teeter. It's a very proper sounding name.
Harris Teeter.
It's an odd name for a grocery store.
This is the first time in my life I'm hearing these names.
Yes,
I'm used to I don't know, Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and
right. Those are big national chains. These are more regional. And the reality in America is a lot of these regional grocery stores are owned by big chains, but they've retained their regional names because they're, the kinds of stores that have been around for decades and that families grew up with. So there's a lot of name recognition. And the final one that I'm going to mention is called Publix. It's Publix. Publix. Those are, and there's a lot of grocery stores down here. Those are all those are within a short drive of my house, basically. And one of them is even within walking distance. Not Piggly Wiggly, actually. Piggly Wiggly is more of a Florida, South Carolina, maybe Georgia thing. I haven't been to many. I haven't shopped the pig that many times in my past. But
shop the pig. We don't have this concept of I don't think of a regional grocery store. In Italy, I think you will find quite often the idea of what you call a deli, I suppose, like a small shop. It's like a small, usually family-run grocery store. For example,
the one that was by your old apartment, right?
I was going to mention. I took you there. We got. Oh, this is
so good. I was so hungry coming off of a plane too.
John landed at FCO in Rome, and I did I pick you up? I think I picked you up.
Yeah, you did.
We drove and we went to my place and where we used to live before, and there is this deli. Still exists, but we don't go there quite as much anymore. And it's called Da Bruno. So Bruno is the name. It's like Bruno's, basically. It means you're going to Bruno's. Right. What you got, it's typical of Rome. So Italian listeners, shout out. You will understand what I mean. It's pizza e mortazza. That's the name in Rome, which means, so mortazza would be the Roman dialect for mortadella, right? Okay. And it's funny because you're it's basically this alliteration, pizza mortazza, lots of Z letters, lots of R's. Right. And it's basically just like, so when we say pizza in central and southern Italy, we don't mean the round pizza.
No, it was not that at all.
It was not that. It's what in northern Italy and in the rest of the world you would call a focaccia, right? That
Right.
was a thick focaccia that's sliced in half, and you put the mortadella in it, and that's what you got. And that's what in
Right.
Rome they call pizza mortazza, which is very typical over here. But yeah, there's Bruno. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, there's a couple of other ones. There's a shop where we don't go. We don't go because we stopped eating meat a year ago. But it's a very popular store in this area of Rome, which is Ipercarni. It literally means hyper meat.
Oh, wow.
That's what it is. And so you go
Nobody's
there.
confused about what they sell.
Nobody's going. No, it's very giant sign. The hyper meat. You go there for all your meat needs.
Okay.
But we don't. Sylvia and I, we go to this smaller chain. It's a national chain. It's called Natura Si, which literally means yes, nature.
Okay.
In English.
I was going to say, I thought it sounds like it's a nature thing.
It means nature, yes. That's what it means. Nature, yes.
Yes, please. Give me some nature.
And that's where we go for, we like to buy these like organic vegetables.
Hey, you get your fancy vegetables and fruits and things, right?
It's where we also find the more exotic stuff. Speaking of, this is so Unwind and so Unplugged specifically. shout out to friend of MacStories, Nick here. They published this indie blog. They've been publishing for many, many years. Nick is a great person all around. Nick recently posted this article from the New York Times. This story about these Italian chefs and food scientists who optimized the perfect recipe for a cacio e pepe.
Oh,
right. So
I love that.
I actually went to bed very late last night because I stayed up like a full hour doing this research. So I read this article in the Times. The idea being that, so the cacio e pepe, right? The pasta. You have the pecorino cheese, the Roman style pecorino cheese, and some ground black pepper. And the theory is that you're supposed to turn that into a cream, right? It's got to become from the grated cheese and the pepper into a cream. And then you put the pasta into the cream and that's, you mix it and the cream is supposed to stay a cream. It's not supposed to create this like...
It's not supposed to thicken into hardened cheese or anything like that.
The common mistake. So for many years, I tried to replicate the perfect cacio e pepe at home, and I never could because it would create all the cheese would solidify and it wouldn't turn into a cream. And so I finally discovered from this story that what they do in many restaurants and what these Italian scientists and chefs published in a white paper, they have published a paper about this, is that the secret is cornstarch.
Oh, interesting.
So the problem with pecorino cheese is that when you add the hot water, because I thought, well, the cacio e pepe, you just get the cheese, you grab with a spoon some hot water from the pasta that you're cooking, and you put the water in the cheese, and then you mix it, and it turns into cream. And I couldn't figure out, why is it not a cream for me when I do this? And that's because there's not enough starch in the pasta that I was cooking. But if you use cornstarch, it's all chemistry. Like the starch basically keeps together the proteins of the cheese so that it basically stays like this smooth, creamy, cream instead of turning into little blocks of cheese.
Yeah, it can no longer solidify because of the starch that's in there, right?
Exactly.
Is that kind of what you're saying? Yeah.
And so I was reading about this and then I started watching some YouTube videos and I came across, and this is all
This is why he was up late.
This is why I was up late. But then this is why I'm bringing it back to Natura Si, to the Yes Nature chain.
Right.
There's this alternative to cornstarch. Because the cornstarch, it adds a bit of a strong flavor if you overdo it. And you don't want to cover the flavor of the pecorino cheese, right? And it also adds a bit of opacity to the color. It doesn't stay...
It adds a texture probably, I would think, too.
And it also, the cream is supposed to stay white and shiny.
And
Instead,
smooth, yeah.
and smooth. But if you add too much cornstarch, it gets kind of yellowy and not as shiny.
Got it.
But there's this root vegetable that is rich in starch, and it comes from Asia, and I think specifically from Japan, and it's
Okay.
called Kuzu. So I was reading about this, and the idea is that if you can find this Kuzu powder, and you mix it in water, you create a solution, and then with a blender, you blend the cheese and the pepper and the water with Kuzu. You get a cream. You take the cream, you put it in a pan, and you start warming up the pan. And no matter how hot it gets, and then even if you add some water from like the boiling pasta, it's not gonna solidify because the starch contained naturally in the kuzu, it's gonna keep it all together and creamy. I was watching this video, so I saved everything, and this morning I presented this research to Sylvia, and initially she made fun of me. She was like, "You were up last night reading about cacio e pepe and the New York Times." So she made fun of me.
Of course.
But then I convinced her because I can be very persuasive, and we discovered that Natura C, that shop sells a little. They sell basically kuzu powder. So
Okay.
the next time I'm going there, I'm getting, I don't know how expensive it's going to be because these exotic products, they cost a fortune usually.
do.
So I suppose that a little box of kuzu is going to be like 15 euros or something.
Right.
But I am going to attempt the perfect cacio e pepe at home with the kuzu, which supposedly will not add any extra flavor and will keep the shininess of the cream. So
All right. Well, I'm excited to hear how it goes for you because that's a dish that I love myself, and I've never heard of kuzu powder. I don't know where I would go even to try to buy it around here, but I may keep an eye out for it.
Sylvia said, knowing you, if you can perfect the perfect cacio e pepe whenever you're going to have guests over, you're going to brag that you can make the perfect cacio e pepe and you're going to cook cacio e pepe all the time.
Every single time someone's at your house, yes.
Which
bet.
I can see myself doing that, honestly, yes.
Oh, that's great. That's great. All right, Federico, why don't we dive into just a few picks here, a couple of picks for the week. I have kind of a dark pick, I gotta say.
Okay, all right.
All right. So I'm gonna it comes with a bit of a warning label, which is this is a documentary, a 3-part documentary on Max called An Update on Our Family. And this dives into the world of family vloggers, a world that I knew existed. And this story I was vaguely aware of, but I never really followed it at the time. And this is about a family called the Stoffers. And the Stoffers were this family in Ohio, I think. And they blew up on YouTube. And they realized over time, like a lot of YouTubers do, they realized what worked and what didn't work. And through the course of their career on YouTube, you kind of see them realize that, oh, well, you know what? When we had a baby, we got a lot of views when we had our baby, and so they started, what they ended up doing is getting deeper and deeper into their very personal parts of their family life on YouTube, vlogging about it. And they became incredibly successful. They had big national brands that were sponsoring them. They were making a lot of money. They bought a big house. And then they decided, first of all, I guess it happens a lot with family vloggers. At least the documentary seems to suggest that a lot of them keep having more and more children because it's good for the views, which is a pretty dark thing in and of itself. And they decided to adopt, and they adopted a little boy from China. And then this is the story about how that all went very wrong and how the internet ended up turning on them and effectively canceling them. And then they just dropped off the face of YouTube very abruptly. And it's just the story behind that. And I think to me, I find that fascinating because I have a bit of a fascination, I guess, with influencer culture. I find it really interesting to see, what people do, what works, how it affects their personal lives, what they share, what they don't. But I also have spent, the last 6 months or so getting our YouTube channel up and running on MacStories. So I've been thinking a lot about how YouTube works, what they reward, what they don't. with the algorithm. And you can see where a family who is doing family vlogs might fall into this trap of going a little too far into the personal side of their lives and having it, go very wrong for them when everything isn't, just, coming up roses for them any longer. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting story if you're interested in that kind of world at all. It's a little bit of a mix between a reality TV show because they're kind of splicing in videos from YouTube with people commenting on this, like adoption experts, experts on YouTube and other things like that explain what was going on and where things all went wrong. And it's just three episodes of about an hour each. So I don't know. I enjoyed it a lot. I recommend it, but it is a bit dark.
That sounds a bit dark. So I want to share a pick this week that I think a lot of our listeners are familiar with, and I have another music pick, although I want to keep that for next week because I want to do more listening. So this week, I'm just going to recommend another podcast by friends of the show, Into the Aether. I've been on a listening binge, catching up on some older Into the Aether episode. It's a low-key video game podcast.
It is.
Hosted by our co-hosts on MPC, Brandon Bigley and Stephen Hilger. It's an excellent video game show, which is released weekly. They have a Patreon with additional content for subscribers. And it's what I think is unique about Into the Aether is that, beyond the unique perspectives of Brendan and Steven, where they don't necessarily talk about the latest games. Maybe, everybody's now talking about, I don't know, the new Assassin's Creed, and maybe they're talking about the PSP or the Nintendo DS. They just talk about the games they like and the games they're playing at the moment.
Right.
What I enjoy is it's a very different show from other video game podcasts where there tends to be a lot of shouting, a lot of crosstalk, a lot of like gamer energy, and
Right.
and you don't find that on Into the Aether. It's low key, it's friendly, it's funny, and it goes deep on the games. They recently published for members, I think, a retrospective on the game of the year for 2017, because it's the year before Into the Aether started, and they didn't have a podcast when the Nintendo Switch came out in 2017, and so they did this retrospective, which is, I think, over 3 hours long, about the game of the year for 2017. They very famously did last year a 15-hour episode about the games of the decade from the year 2000 to 2009.
Yeah.
They do their seasons. So, for example, last year, it was the debut of the new Into the Aether season. They did a retrospective about the GameCube. And this year, they're doing the PSP, which is probably up there with the GameCube, probably my favorite console of all time. And I'm very excited about that. So if you've never listened to Into the Aether, I cannot recommend it enough. I personally subscribe to their Patreon, which I think is, that additional content, I think makes it all worth it. And I would love to find more video game podcasts that are not like capital G gamer oriented, but are just like two friends talking about video games without shouting and without yelling at each other, or without sharing stupid theories about, inclusion in video games and what other of some of these gamer, content creators do. So yeah, shout out to Into the Aether, a very fun, low-key show with a very safe and welcoming community, which I think is hard to find these days on the internet.
Yeah, especially in gaming. I mean,
especially in gaming,
right? It's a very thoughtful show. It's funny. I actually recommended it years ago now on Unwind on an episode, I think, where I just monologued because you were on vacation or something, and I sat down and monologued about all the ways I find games, and Into the Aether was one of the ways I do that. And I've been listening to for years too, and joined the Patreon, and it's a great show.
Yeah.
All right, Federico, that's it for this week's episode of MacStories Unwind. You can find us on MacStories.net and on social media by looking for Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees everywhere. JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.